The gunshot echoed through the penthouse as Emily pressed herself against the marble wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Outside, Denver's Christmas lights twinkled mockingly through floor-to-ceiling windows, while chaos erupted in the hallway beyond. "Stay down," Nikolai's voice cut through the darkness, cold and commanding. She could see him moving like a shadow, gun drawn. Every muscle coiled for violence. This was not the man who had rescued her from the snowy road 3 days ago. This was someone else entirely, someone terrifying. Another shot. Glass shattered somewhere in the distance. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched the phone he'd given her, the emergency number glowing on the screen. How had her life spiraled from a broken-down car on Christmas Eve to hiding from bullets in a Russian Mafia boss's penthouse? The answer came flooding back, because her car hadn't broken down by accident, because she'd witnessed something at the hospital that made her a target. Because the man who'd appeared through the snow like some dark angel wasn't her savior. He was the most dangerous person in Colorado. And somehow, impossibly, she was falling for him. "Emily." His voice was closer now, urgent. "We need to move. Now." She looked up into those ice-blue eyes that had haunted her dreams, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything forever. Welcome to Passion and Power. Tonight we're diving into a Christmas story that will melt your heart and freeze your blood. Comment below what city you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. We've got an incredible journey ahead, and I promise you won't want to miss a single twist in Emily and Nikolai's dangerous romance. The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets across the isolated Colorado highway, turning the world into a white void. Emily Carter's Honda Civic coughed once, twice, then died with a mechanical wheeze that echoed her own exhausted sigh. "Perfect," she muttered, pulling over to the shoulder. Absolutely perfect. Christmas Eve, and she was stranded on State Route 285, 30 miles from Denver. The dashboard lights flickered once before going dark, leaving her in the eerie glow of her hazard lights blinking against the storm. Emily rested her forehead against the steering wheel for exactly 3 seconds, all she allowed herself for self-pity these days. At 28, she'd learned that life didn't care about your plans, your exhaustion, or the fact that you'd just pulled a 16-hour shift at Denver General Hospital because someone needed to cover the holiday emergency room. The wind howled outside, rocking her small car. She pulled her thin coat tighter and stepped out into the bitter cold. The hood release felt frozen under her fingers, but she managed to pop it open. White smoke billowed up immediately, dissipating into the swirling snow. "Great," she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. She pulled out her phone, hoping for a miracle. No signal. Of course. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, flanked by towering pine trees heavy with snow. No other cars, no houses, no lights except the pale glow of her hazards cutting through the darkness. Fear began to creep in, cold and insistent. The temperature was dropping fast, and her coat was designed for hospital corridors, not Colorado blizzards. That's when she saw the headlights. 2 beams cut through the snow like searchlights, approaching from the direction of Denver. Emily felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Help was coming, but out here, in the middle of nowhere, help could be dangerous. The vehicle slowed, a sleek black sedan that looked expensive even through the snow. It pulled up behind her car with the quiet purr of a well-tuned engine. The driver's door opened. The man who emerged made Emily take an involuntary step backward. He was tall, probably 6'3", with the kind of presence that commanded attention, even in a blizzard. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones and pale eyes that seemed to see everything. His black wool coat was perfectly tailored, not a snowflake daring to settle on the expensive fabric. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room. "Problems," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. It wasn't a question. Emily found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "My car broke down. I was trying to call for help, but there's no signal." He glanced at her phone, then at the smoking engine, then back at her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Out here, help doesn't come. Not tonight." The way he said it sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. There was something in his tone, knowledge, certainty, as if he understood things about this stretch of road that she didn't. "I'll wait for the storm to pass," she said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew how foolish they sounded. The snow was getting heavier, not lighter. He studied her for a long moment, those pale eyes taking in her hospital scrubs, visible beneath her inadequate coat, her tired face the way she was already shivering, despite trying to hide it. "You'll freeze," he stated simply. Then he walked to his car and opened the passenger door. Warm air and soft light spilled out into the night. "Get in." Emily hesitated. Everything about this man screamed danger. The expensive clothes, the predatory grace, the way he spoke as if he was used to being obeyed without question. But the alternative was staying out here in a storm that was rapidly becoming deadly. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Nikolai," he replied, not offering a last name. "And you're Emily Carter, 28, nurse at Denver General. You live alone in a studio apartment on Colfax Avenue. Can't you work too many shifts because you're paying off student loans?" Emily's blood turned to ice water. "How do you— Get in the car, Emily." This time it wasn't a request. The authority in his voice was absolute, and suddenly she understood that her choice wasn't between accepting help from a stranger or waiting for rescue. Her choice was between getting in his car willingly or finding out what happened if she refused. She got in. The interior was warm and luxurious. Leather seats, soft lighting, classical music playing quietly from hidden speakers. It smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something darker that she couldn't identify. Nikolai slid behind the wheel with fluid grace, and Emily noticed details she'd missed in the snow. A white dress shirt with the top 4 buttons undone, revealing a glimpse of muscled chest and what looked like the edge of a tattoo on his neck. A platinum watch caught the dashboard light as he shifted into drive. "Where are you taking me?" she asked as they pulled away from her abandoned car. "Somewhere safe." That's not an answer. He glanced at her, and for a moment something almost like amusement flickered in those cold eyes. "No, it's not." They drove in silence through the storm, the sedan handling the treacherous roads with ease. Emily watched the landscape blur past, endless snow, dark trees, the occasional distant light that disappeared as quickly as it appeared. 20 minutes later, the lights of Denver began to glow through the snow. But instead of heading toward the city center, Nikolai took an exit that led to the most expensive part of town, an area where Emily had never even driven through, let alone visited. "This isn't the way to a hospital," she said, her voice tight with growing alarm. "No," he agreed, "it's not." The building they pulled up to was all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like a monument to wealth and power. A valet appeared immediately, taking the keys with a deferential nod. Emily noticed the man's eyes never quite met Nikolai's directly. "Mr. Volkov," the valet said, "welcome back." Volkov. The name meant nothing to Emily, but the way the valet said it, with a mixture of respect and fear, told her everything she needed to know about the man who had rescued her from the storm. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery. Emily watched the numbers climb, 20 floors, 30, 40, until they reached the penthouse level. The doors opened directly into an apartment that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Denver's skyline, the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The space was modern and minimalist, all clean lines and expensive materials, marble, steel, leather. "Sit," Nikolai said, gesturing toward a leather sofa that faced the windows. "I'll get you something warm." Emily remained standing, her arms wrapped around herself. "I want to go home." "That's not possible." "Why not?" He paused in the doorway to what she assumed was the kitchen, turning back to study her with those unsettling, pale eyes. "Because your car didn't break down by accident, Emily, and going home right now would be the last mistake you ever make." Emily spent the night on the leather sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the sound of Nikolai moving through the penthouse, quiet footsteps, the murmur of phone conversations in what sounded like Russian. When morning light filtered through the massive windows, she found him in the kitchen, fully dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been crafted by angels. He was drinking coffee from a delicate porcelain cup, reading something on his phone with the focused attention of a man accustomed to life-or-death decisions. "Good morning," he said without looking up. "There's coffee and food if you're hungry." Emily's stomach growled traitorously, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. The kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design, marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, everything spotless and perfectly arranged. "I need to go home," she said, ignoring the food despite her hunger. "I have to work today." "No, you don't." Nikolai finally looked up, those pale eyes studying her with unsettling intensity. "I called the hospital, told them you had a family emergency and would be taking time off. You had no right." "I had every right." He set down his cup with deliberate precision. "3 people died last night, Emily, all of them connected to Viktor Kozlov. All of them tortured before they were killed, presumably for information they didn't have." The pastry Emily had been reaching for suddenly looked nauseating. "What does that have to do with me?" "Everything." Nikolai stood, moving around the kitchen island with that predatory grace she was beginning to recognize. "Someone is looking for what Viktor stole. They're eliminating anyone who might know where it is. You're next on their list." "But I don't know anything." "They don't know that." He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her pulse quicken despite her fear. "And they won't stop to ask nicely." Emily backed against the counter, her hands gripping the marble edge. "So what am I supposed to do, hide here forever?" "You're supposed to remember what Viktor told you." "I already said." "You're lying." His voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. "And while I appreciate your loyalty to a dead man's secrets, that loyalty is going to get you killed." She stared up at him, taking in the sharp angles of his face. The way his white dress shirt revealed just enough of his chest to be distracting. The elegant tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar. Everything about him screamed danger, but there was something else. A careful control that suggested the danger was leashed, directed, purposeful. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm the man who's going to keep you alive." "That's not an answer." A smile ghosted across his lips. "I'm Nikolai Volkov. I run certain businesses in this part of the country. Businesses that require discretion, loyalty, and occasionally, violence." The words hung in the air between them like a confession. Emily felt her world tilt on its axis as the implications sank in. She was trapped in a penthouse with a man who had just calmly admitted to being a criminal. "You're Mafia," she breathed. "Russian Bratva, technically. But yes." "And Viktor was my partner until he decided to steal from me." Nikolai's expression hardened. "Theft is bad for business, Emily. It sends the wrong message to other potential partners." His phone buzzed against the marble counter. Nikolai glanced at the screen, and Emily saw his expression change, a subtle shift that transformed him from merely dangerous to absolutely lethal. "We need to leave," he said, already moving toward what she assumed was a bedroom. "Now." "What's wrong?" "They found your apartment." Emily's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean they found my apartment?" Nikolai emerged from the bedroom, carrying a leather jacket and what looked like a gun in a shoulder holster. The casual way he strapped on the weapon made Emily's knees weak. "I mean, they're there right now, tearing it apart, looking for anything Viktor might have given you." He handed her the jacket. "Put this on. We're leaving." The elevator ride down felt endless. Nikolai stood beside her, radiating tension like heat, his hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. When the doors opened in the parking garage, a black SUV was waiting, engine running. The driver was a mountain of a man with Slavic features and hands that looked like they could crush skulls. He nodded respectfully to Nikolai but said nothing as they climbed into the back seat. "Marcus," Nikolai said by way of introduction. "He doesn't talk much, but he's very good at his job, which is keeping people alive." They drove through Denver's morning traffic in silence, taking a route that seemed deliberately circuitous. Emily watched the city pass by, normal people going to normal jobs, living normal lives that didn't involve Russian mobsters and death threats. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a building she recognized, Denver General Hospital. "Why are we here?" Emily asked, but Nikolai was already getting out of the SUV. "Because you need to remember what Victor told you," he said, extending his hand to help her out. "And sometimes memory needs the right trigger." The hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation, exactly as Emily remembered. She'd worked here for 3 years, pulling long shifts in the emergency room, saving lives and watching others slip away despite her best efforts. They took the elevator to the 4th floor, to the emergency department where Emily had spent most of her adult life. The charge nurse, Sarah, looked up from her station with surprise. "Emily, I thought you were taking time off for a family emergency." "I am," Emily said, acutely aware of Nikolai's presence beside her. "I just needed to pick up something from my locker." Emily led him through the department to the staff locker room, her hands shaking as she worked the combination. Everything felt surreal, being back in this familiar place with a man who had casually admitted to being a criminal. "Tell me about that night," Nikolai said as she opened her locker. "Victor Kozlov, walk me through everything you remember." Emily closed her eyes, trying to recall details that had seemed unimportant at the time. He came in around 11 p.m. Multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. He was conscious, but barely. What did Victor say? At first, nothing coherent. He was in shock, losing a lot of blood. Emily opened her eyes, meeting Nikolai's intense gaze. But then, when Dr. Martinez was working on the chest wounds, Victor grabbed my wrist. And he pulled me close and whispered something. I thought it was delirium. Patients say all kinds of things when they're dying. What exactly did he say? Emily took a deep breath, letting the memory surface fully for the first time. He said, "Warehouse 47, Industrial Boulevard, under the red door." Then he said a name, Katerina. After that, he lost consciousness and died on the table 10 minutes later. Nikolai went very still. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "You're certain that's what he said? Warehouse 47, Industrial Boulevard?" "Yes. Why? What does it mean?" But Nikolai was already moving, pulling out his phone as he headed for the door. Emily heard him speaking rapid Russian to someone, his tone urgent and commanding. When he finished the call, he turned back to her with an expression that made her blood run cold. "It means," and he said, "that you just became the most valuable person in Colorado, and the most hunted." The warehouse district of Denver stretched along the South Platte River like a forgotten industrial graveyard. Warehouse 47 sat at the end of Industrial Boulevard, a nondescript concrete building that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. "Stay in the car," Nikolai said, as Marcus pulled up to the building's entrance. Like hell. Emily was already reaching for the door handle. "If this is about what Victor told me, then I'm coming with you." Nikolai's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising gentleness. "This isn't a game, Emily. If I'm right about what's inside that building, there are people who would kill you just for being here. People are already trying to kill me," she pointed out. "At least this way, I'll know why." For a moment, they stared at each other in the back seat of the SUV. Emily could see the conflict in Nikolai's pale eyes, the desire to protect her warring with the recognition that she had a right to know what she'd stumbled into. "Fine," he said finally, "but you stay behind me. You do exactly what I say, and if I tell you to run, you run, understood?" The warehouse's main entrance was secured with a heavy chain and padlock, but Nikolai produced a set of keys that opened it easily. Inside, the warehouse was a cavern of shadows and dust motes, dancing in shafts of sunlight. "There," Nikolai said, pointing toward the far end of the building. Emily followed his gaze and saw it. A single red door set into the concrete wall, so faded and weathered that it was barely distinguishable from the grey around it. The red door was locked, but again Nikolai had the right key. It opened to reveal a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. "Basement," Emily whispered. "Storage," Nikolai corrected. Victor always liked to keep his most valuable assets underground. They descended the stairs, Nikolai's phone providing the only light. The basement was smaller than Emily had expected, a single room lined with metal shelving and filing cabinets. But what caught her attention immediately were the computers. 3 high-end laptops sat on a makeshift desk, their screens dark, but their power lights glowing softly in the gloom. Beside them were stacks of documents, photographs, and what looked like financial records. Jesus, Nikolai breathed, moving toward the desk. He kept everything. Emily watched as he powered up one of the laptops, his fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The screen came to life, displaying what looked like accounting software, columns of numbers, dates, transaction records. "What is it?" she asked. "Victor's insurance policy." Nikolai's voice was grim. "Records of every deal, every payment, every favor traded in the last 5 years. Names, dates, amounts, everything." "Including what he stole from you?" "Including what he stole from everyone." Nikolai scrolled through the files, his expression growing darker with each screen. "This isn't just about money, Emily. This is about power. Information. The kind of secrets that could bring down half the criminal organizations in the western United States." Emily moved closer, trying to make sense of the numbers on the screen. Why would he keep all this? Because Victor was paranoid. He knew that in our business, information is the only real currency. But he's dead. Yes, but his information isn't. Nikolai turned to look at her, and Emily saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "Do you understand what this means, Emily? You didn't just overhear an address. You overheard the location of the most dangerous secret in the American criminal underworld." The implications hit her like a physical blow. "That's why people are trying to kill me. That's why everyone is trying to kill you." The sound of footsteps on the stairs above cut him off. Nikolai's hand went to his weapon in one fluid motion, his body shifting to place himself between Emily and the staircase. "How many keys did Victor have?" Emily whispered. "Too many," Nikolai replied grimly. The footsteps were getting closer, multiple sets, moving with the careful precision of people who knew how to be quiet when necessary. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized they were trapped. Nikolai pulled out his phone, typing a quick message before sliding it back into his pocket. Then he drew his gun, checking the chamber with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. "When I say run," he whispered, "you go up those stairs and you don't stop until you reach Marcus, understand? What about you? I'll be right behind you." But Emily could see the lie in his eyes. He was planning to stay, to fight, to give her time to escape, even if it meant sacrificing himself. The first figure appeared at the bottom of the stairs. A man in a dark suit with the kind of face that suggested violence was his primary profession. He saw Nikolai immediately and raised his own weapon. "Volkov," the man said in accented English, "you should not have come here." "Victor," Nikolai replied calmly, "I should have known you'd fake your own death." "It's exactly the kind of cowardly thing you'd do." Emily's world tilted. The man who had died on her table, the man whose whispered words had started this nightmare, was standing at the bottom of the stairs, very much alive. "You always were too trusting," Victor said, his gun trained on Nikolai's chest. "Did you really think I would steal from you without an exit strategy?" "You planned this," Emily whispered. "Of course I planned this." Victor's attention shifted to her, and Emily saw madness lurking behind his eyes. "Did you think it was coincidence that your car broke down on that particular stretch of highway? That Nikolai happened to be driving by at exactly the right moment? You sabotaged her car," Nikolai said, his voice deadly quiet. "I sabotaged everything. Her car, her safety, her life, all of it designed to bring you here to this moment with the one person who could lead us to my insurance policy." Emily felt sick. Everything, her rescue from the storm, Nikolai's protection, even her growing attraction to him, had been orchestrated by a dead man who wasn't dead. "The only thing I didn't plan," Victor continued, "was how attached you'd become to her. That's going to make this more difficult than it needs to be." "You're not touching her," Nikolai said. "I'm not planning to touch her. I'm planning to kill her, right after she watches me kill you." The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the confined space, but it wasn't Victor who fired. Emily screamed as Nikolai dove sideways, his own weapon blazing. Victor stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, his gun clattering across the concrete floor. "Run!" Nikolai shouted, but Emily was already moving, not toward the stairs, but toward Victor's fallen weapon. She grabbed the gun with shaking hands, pointing it at the man who had destroyed her life with his elaborate deception. Victor looked at her with something like admiration. "You have more spine than I expected," he said. "Too bad you won't live to—" The second gunshot came from the staircase. Victor's eyes widened in surprise before he crumpled to the ground, a spreading pool of blood beneath his head. Emily looked up to see Marcus descending the stairs, his own weapon drawn, his expression as calm as if he'd just swatted a fly. "Boss," he said to Nikolai, "we need to go. Now. More coming." Nikolai was already moving, grabbing the laptops and as many documents as he could carry. "Emily, help me with these files." But Emily couldn't move. She stood frozen, staring at Victor's body, the gun still clutched in her trembling hands. "Emily." Nikolai's voice was gentle but urgent. "We have to go." She looked up at him, this man who had rescued her, protected her, been willing to die for her, and realized that despite everything, despite the lies and manipulation and violence, she trusted him completely. "Okay," she whispered, dropping the gun and moving to help him gather the evidence of Victor's crimes. As they climbed the stairs toward an uncertain future, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. The safe house was a modest ranch home in a quiet suburb of Aurora, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business and asked no questions. Emily sat at the kitchen table, watching Nikolai work through Victor's files with focused intensity. 3 days had passed since the warehouse, 3 days of hiding, of waiting, of trying to process the fact that her entire life had been upended by a dead man's revenge plot. "They're covering it up," Emily said, watching the local news report on a gas explosion at an industrial warehouse. "Of course they are." Nikolai didn't look up from the laptop screen. "Victor had connections in law enforcement, city government, the mayor's office. Our gang war in the warehouse district would be bad for business." Emily studied his profile in the lamplight, the sharp cheekbones, the way his white dress shirt had wrinkled after 3 days of constant wear, the platinum watch that caught the light when he moved. "What happens when you're done with those files?" she asked. "I destroy them, all of them. Even the ones that could help you find what Victor stole." Nikolai finally looked up, his pale eyes meeting hers across the table. "Especially those." Emily frowned. "I don't understand. Isn't that why we're here? To get back what he took from you?" "What Victor stole from me was money, what he stole from others." Nikolai gestured toward the stacks of documents. Names of informants, details of ongoing investigations, financial records that could destroy legitimate businesses. "This information is too dangerous to exist. So you're just going to give up millions of dollars? I'm going to prevent a war." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Emily realized she was seeing something she hadn't expected. Honor. Twisted, perhaps, by the violent world he inhabited, but honor nonetheless. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "What did you expect? A monster." Nikolai's smile was sad and self-aware. "I am a monster, Emily. I've killed people. I've destroyed lives. I've built an empire on violence and fear." He paused, his fingers stilling on the keyboard. "But I've never pretended to be anything else." Emily stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the quiet suburban street. Normal people were coming home from normal jobs, walking dogs, checking mail, living lives that didn't involve Russian mobsters and underground warehouses. "I can't go back to that," she said, more to herself than to him. "To what?" "Normal. My old life. Even if this ends, say even if the people hunting me give up or die or forget, I can't pretend I don't know what I know now." She heard Nikolai's chair scrape against the floor, felt his presence behind her before he spoke. "What do you know now?" Emily turned to face him, acutely aware of how close he was standing, of the way the lamplight caught the edge of his neck tattoo, of the careful way he held himself, as if he was fighting not to touch her. "I know that the world is more dangerous than I thought. I know that good and evil aren't as simple as I believed. I know that sometimes the monster is the one trying to protect you. Emily, I know that I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them like a confession and a challenge. Nikolai's expression didn't change, but Emily saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise perhaps or fear. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do. She stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of grey in his pale blue eyes, to smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm not a good man, Emily. I don't care. I've done things. I don't care. You should care. His voice was rough, strained. You should run from me as fast as you can, and never look back. Too late for that. For a moment, they stood frozen, the tension between them electric and dangerous. Then Nikolai's control snapped. His hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones with surprising gentleness. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "Probably. You'll regret it." "I doubt it." When he kissed her, it was with the desperate intensity of a man who had been holding back for too long. Emily melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted like coffee and danger, and something she couldn't name but knew she'd been craving since that first night in the snow. The kiss deepened, grew urgent, and Emily felt heat pool in her stomach as Nikolai's hands moved to her waist, pulling her flush against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nikolai rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things," he said. "Everything's already complicated." The sound of breaking glass cut him off. Nikolai's head snapped up, his body going rigid with alert tension. In one fluid motion, he pushed Emily behind him and drew his weapon. "Stay down," he whispered, moving toward the front of the house. Emily crouched behind the kitchen counter, her heart hammering as she heard footsteps on the front porch, the soft sound of someone testing the door handle. "Nikolai Volkov," a voice called from outside. "We know you're in there. We have the house surrounded." Emily recognized the accent, Russian, like Nikolai's, but harsher, more guttural. "Who is it?" she whispered. "Competition," Nikolai replied grimly. "Victor's former partners, probably. They want the files." "What do we do?" "We give them what they want." Before Emily could ask what he meant, Nikolai was moving. He grabbed one of the laptops from the table, along with a stack of the most sensitive documents, and shoved them into her hands. "Back door," he said. "There's a car in the alley. Keys are in the visor. Drive to the police station and don't stop for anything." "What about you?" "I'll hold them off." "No." Emily grabbed his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "We go together or we don't go at all." The front door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Dark figures poured through the opening, weapons raised, moving with military precision. Nikolai shoved Emily toward the back of the house as the first gunshots rang out. They ran through the kitchen, down a narrow hallway, Emily clutching the laptop and documents against her chest, while Nikolai returned fire over his shoulder. The back door led to a small yard and an alley beyond. Emily could see the car Nikolai had mentioned, a nondescript sedan that looked like it had been chosen specifically for its ability to blend in. They were halfway across the yard when the spotlight hit them. "Stop!" The voice came from their left, where another team of men had been waiting in ambush. "Drop your weapons!" Nikolai spun, his gun tracking toward the new threat, but Emily could see they were outnumbered. Men were emerging from the shadows on all sides, at least 8 of them, all armed, all professional. "The files," one of them called out in accented English. "Give us Victor's files and the woman lives." "And if I refuse?" Nikolai asked, though Emily could hear in his voice that he already knew the answer. "Then you both die, and we take the files anyway." Emily looked at the laptop in her hands, the key to Victor's secrets, the information that could destroy lives and topple criminal empires. Then she looked at Nikolai, this dangerous man who had risked everything to protect her. "Take them," she said, stepping forward. "Emily, no." "Take them," she repeated, holding out the laptop and documents. "It's over." The lead gunman smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. Smart girl. But as he reached for the laptop, Emily made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of handing over the files, she hurled the laptop as hard as she could against the brick wall of the house. The computer exploded in a shower of plastic and circuitry, the hard drive shattering beyond any hope of recovery. Before anyone could react, she was tearing the documents into pieces, scattering them to the wind. "You stupid bitch," the gunman snarled, raising his weapon. The shot rang out, but it wasn't aimed at Emily. Nikolai had used her distraction to take down two of the gunmen, diving and rolling as return fire chewed up the ground where he'd been standing. What followed was chaos. Muzzle flashes in the darkness, the sharp crack of gunfire, the smell of cordite and fear. Emily found herself pressed against the brick wall, watching Nikolai move like a deadly shadow, taking down enemies with the cold efficiency of a professional killer. When the silence finally fell, 5 men lay dead in the alley, and Nikolai was bleeding from a graze on his left arm. "Are you hurt?" he asked, moving to her side. Emily shook her head, though she was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "The files are gone. All of them." Nikolai looked at the scattered pieces of paper, the destroyed laptop, the end of Victor's legacy of secrets and lies. "It's over." But even as he said it, Emily could see in his eyes that he didn't believe it. Victor was dead, his files destroyed, but the world they inhabited didn't forgive or forget easily. 2 weeks later, Emily stood in the kitchen of Nikolai's penthouse, watching the sunrise paint Denver's skyline in shades of gold and pink. The city looked peaceful from 40 floors up, giving no hint of the violence that had erupted in its shadows. The aftermath of the warehouse incident had been swift and brutal. Victor's remaining associates had been eliminated or driven out of Colorado within days. The corrupt officials on his payroll had quietly resigned or been transferred. The criminal empire he'd tried to build had collapsed like a house of cards. "You're up early," Nikolai said, emerging from the bedroom in dark slacks and a white dress shirt, the top 4 buttons undone as always. The bandage on his left arm was gone, leaving only a thin scar as evidence of their escape from the safe house. "Couldn't sleep," Emily replied, not turning from the window. "I keep thinking about the people who died. They made their choices. Did they? Or were they just caught up in something bigger than themselves like I was?" Nikolai moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, smell his cologne mixed with the scent of expensive soap. "Some of them, maybe, but Victor chose to steal from me. His associates chose to help him. The men who came after us chose to kill rather than negotiate. And what did I choose? To trust me." Emily finally turned to look at him, taking in the sharp planes of his face, the pale eyes that had haunted her dreams, the careful way he held himself even in the safety of his own home. "Was that a mistake?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "Ask me in a year." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up below them. Emily had been living in the penthouse for 2 weeks now, ostensibly for her protection, but increasingly because neither of them could bear the thought of separation. "I got a call this morning," Nikolai said eventually. "From the hospital." Emily's stomach clenched. "What kind of call?" "They want to know when you're coming back to work." The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Emily had been dreading this moment, when she would have to choose between the life she'd built and the life she'd stumbled into. "What did you tell them?" "That it was your decision to make." Emily moved away from the window, needing distance to think clearly. The penthouse felt like a luxury prison sometimes, beautiful, comfortable, but cut off from the real world. She missed her patients, missed the sense of purpose that came from saving lives. "I can't go back," she said finally. "Not to the way things were." "No," Nikolai agreed. "You can't. But I can't stay here forever either. Hiding, being protected, living in your shadow." "What are you saying?" Emily turned to face him, her decision crystallizing as she spoke. "I'm saying I want to find a middle ground, a way to be with you without losing myself." Nikolai's expression was carefully neutral. "And how do you propose to do that?" "I want to work again. Maybe not at Denver General, too many memories there, but somewhere. A clinic, maybe. Somewhere that serves people who can't afford fancy hospitals." "That's dangerous. You'd be exposed, vulnerable." "Everything's dangerous now, but I won't let fear stop me from living." Nikolai studied her for a long moment, and Emily could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to protect her warring with respect for her independence. "There's a clinic in 5 Points," he said finally. "It serves the immigrant community, people who can't or won't go to official hospitals. They need nurses and they don't ask too many questions about backgrounds." "You know about it?" "I fund it. Anonymously." Emily felt a smile tug at her lips. Of course you do. It's not charity, Nikolai said quickly. It's good business. Healthy communities are profitable communities. But Emily could see through the excuse to the man underneath, someone who used his criminal empire to help people who had nowhere else to turn. I want to work there, she said. Emily, I want to work there. And I want to come home to you every night. I want to build something real with you, something that isn't based on fear or desperation or the adrenaline of running for our lives. Nikolai moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness. You don't know what you're asking for. I'm asking for a chance for both of us. My world is dangerous. There will always be enemies, always be threats. I can't promise you safety. I'm not asking for safety. I'm asking for honesty, for partnership, for love. The word hung between them like a bridge across an impossible divide. Emily saw something shift in Nikolai's expression, surprise giving way to something deeper, more vulnerable. I love you, she continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. I love your strength and your contradictions. I love the way you protect people even when you pretend you don't care. I love that you're willing to destroy an empire of secrets rather than let innocent people get hurt. Emily, I love you, she repeated, and I think you love me too. For a moment, Nikolai just stared at her, his pale eyes searching her face as if looking for some sign that she didn't mean what she was saying. Then, his control finally cracked. Yes, he whispered, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. God help me. Yes, I love you. When he kissed her this time, it was different from their desperate embrace at the safe house. This was a promise, a commitment, a choice made with full knowledge of the consequences. Emily melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. She could taste the coffee on his lips, feel the controlled strength in his arms, sense the careful way he held her, as if she were something precious and fragile. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nikolai rested his forehead against hers. This won't be easy, he said. Nothing worthwhile ever is. There will be people who try to use you to get to me. Then we'll deal with them. You might get hurt. I might get hurt crossing the street. That doesn't mean I stop walking. Nikolai smiled. A real smile this time, not the cold expression he wore like armor. You're stubborn. You're dangerous. We're a terrible match. We're perfect for each other. Outside, Denver continued its morning routine, unaware that in a penthouse 40 floors above the city, a nurse and a criminal were rewriting the rules of love and loyalty. 6 months later, Emily was working her first shift at the 5 Points Community Clinic when she realized that sometimes the most dangerous roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. As she treated patients who reminded her why she'd become a nurse in the first place, she thought about the man waiting for her at home, the man who had appeared through the snow like salvation and turned out to be exactly that. Nikolai had been true to his word. He was transitioning away from the criminal world, using his resources to fund legitimate businesses and community programs. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't complete, but it was real progress toward the life they both wanted. When her shift ended, Emily found him waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car with that familiar predatory grace that still made her pulse quicken. But now there was something different in his expression, peace perhaps, or hope. How was your first day? He asked, opening the passenger door for her. Perfect, Emily said, settling into the leather seat. Absolutely perfect. As they drove through the Denver streets toward home, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a breakdown on Christmas night and a dangerous stranger saying, "Get in." It had led through violence and betrayal, through secrets and lies, through moments when death seemed certain and love seemed impossible. But here they were, building something beautiful from the wreckage of their old lives, proving that sometimes the most unlikely love stories were the ones worth fighting for. "Get in," Nikolai had said that snowy night, and Emily had made the choice that changed everything. She'd never regretted it for a single moment. Years later, Emily would look back on that autumn morning as the day their real life began. She woke to the sound of children's laughter drifting through the open windows of their house in the mountains outside Aspen. Not the penthouse in Denver. They'd sold that along with most of Nikolai's other properties. This was something different, A home built for peace rather than defense, for love rather than power. Nikolai was already up, standing on the deck with a cup of coffee and his phone, but instead of coordinating criminal enterprises, he was reviewing architectural plans for the new wing of the 5 Points Community Clinic. "Good morning," Emily said, joining him on the deck. "Good morning." He handed her a second cup of coffee, prepared exactly the way she liked it. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years." It was true. The nightmares had finally faded, replaced by dreams of the future they were building together. "Marcus called," Nikolai said. "The Denver operation is completely shut down. The last of the old guard has been bought out or relocated. Any regrets?" Nikolai considered the question seriously, as he always did. "About the money? No. About the power? Sometimes. About you." He turned to look at her, those pale blue eyes that had once seemed so cold, now warm with affection. "Never." Emily smiled, leaning against his side as they watched the sun rise over the mountains. The man who had rescued her from a snowy highway had turned out to be her salvation in more ways than one. "I love you," she said, the words as natural as breathing now. "I love you too," he replied, his arm tightening around her waist. "Even if you did destroy my criminal empire." "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Nikolai corrected. "What was the first?" "Getting in my car that night," Emily laughed, remembering the terrified woman who had stood beside a broken-down Honda in a Colorado blizzard, faced with an impossible choice. She'd chosen trust over fear, love over safety, and it had led her here, to this man, this life, this perfect morning in the mountains. The past would always be part of them, but it no longer defined them. They had chosen each other, chosen to build something better from the wreckage of their old lives. And as the sun climbed higher over the Colorado peaks, Emily knew that some storms were worth weathering, some risks were worth taking, and some love stories were worth fighting for. Even when they began with a breakdown on Christmas night and a dangerous stranger saying, "Get in." And that's how Emily and Nikolai found their happily ever after here at Passion and Power. Sometimes, the most dangerous roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. What did you think of their journey from that snowy highway to their mountain sanctuary? Drop a comment below with your favorite moment, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will steal your heart and take your breath away. Until next time, keep believing in love that conquers all.